Breaking news out of Gwinnett County. Police say a student has died after a shooting near Norcross High School.
An 18-year-old is facing charges in connection to the death.
Kids all know there are no consequences. They come back to school the next day, stuff is still escalated. And then you've got another fight on top of another fight. This restorative practice is not working.
Nigga right here, go right here. Y'all got space, y'all got space. Oh, hell no. Hey, we the girl. Hey, oh shit. Hey, I guess we're going in the girls' bathroom. I guess we're going in the girls' bathroom. Shit.
Gwinnett County parents tell 11 Alive that since August, when the school district outlined new discipline procedures, there have been a rise of what they call violent incidents. To verify, 11 Alive went straight to the source, Gwinnett County Public Schools. Now the district explains suspensions or expulsions should only be used as the most severe way to intervene. Instead, they're focusing on, quote, teachable moments to create a culture of belonging.
We have a child that has died in Gwinnett County. We had a stabbing that took place. Shiloh High School last week, there was a shooting.
Meanwhile, the superintendent insists student violators make up only a small portion of the student body, and that the violators are being kept out of the classroom under this new policy. But he's also trying to rehabilitate disruptive students when he can.
We must and we will work together to solve this crisis. As a parent, I know the concern and the fear these school and community shootings can create. We are committed to keeping our schools safe.
The district says in 2021, the number of fights went from 750 to nearly 1,000 this year. That's a 32% increase. Also, 144 weapons were found last year compared to 182 this year. That's a 26% increase. The district's handbook says that students could face a one-year expulsion for having a weapon on campus, but school administrators, members of the school board, and the superintendent have the discretion to pick a different way to discipline them.
Parents argue that violence in the district has actually gone up and the new system isn't working.
Damn. Oh shit! Oh shit! Oh shit! Oh shit! Hey, that's one! That's one! That's one! That's one right there! That's one right there! Hey, that's one right there! Hey, that's oh shit! Oh shit! Hey, that's one right there!
Restorative practices mean we're supposed to tell you not to do it again. We're not going to get you in real big trouble. Here's your freebie. And maybe that's fine at the elementary level, little kids. Hey, no, not supposed to lie. That's not good. Let's not do that. 15-year-old kids beating the hell out of each other against lockers, there's no restorative practice for that.
Steve Smith. State your name, sir.
Good morning, Steve Smith.
Today we have Steve Smith with us, and he is a concerned citizen, a concerned patriot.
Hi, how are you doing today?
I'm doing just fine. I can't complain at all.
Thank you for having me on.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, Steve, there's been some critics going on online with surrounding your school, Gwinnett County. They're saying that, there's a superintendent there who doesn't belong there. They're saying there are some things that are going on inside the actual facility or institute, if you will, with the children. And the parents are upheaval. They're going to these meetings and they are downright ticked off. What's going on, Steve? Why can't you all just get along?
Well, so it's a bit of a long story. I'll try to make it short. Our county has changed over the last decade or so, and our voting demographics changed a lot to lean Democratic. So we had a big shift in our school board composition in early 2021. And we had a superintendent who'd been here for 25 years, had grown us to the 11th largest district in the nation. And we had a national reputation for excellence. And because the new board members didn't agree with his policies or politics, they fired him with a year and a half left on his contract just because they didn't think they could work with him. They then brought in a new gentleman who had been a principal here in Gwinnett County before, along with a few other positions, left for Washington and to be a superintendent there, helped bankrupt their school district and have a lot of failures. And so, of course, we hired him here to come and do the same thing here, apparently. So that's why you've got a lot of parents who just don't understand why the gentleman was hired to begin with. And now that we're seeing the consequences of his actions, we're wondering why he still has a job at all.
No, absolutely. So there's a lot going on there. I do want to touch on this. This is a wild time here in your state, Georgia, in the state of Georgia, period, because we've got Clayton County. I think the principal is supposedly stepping down from some sexual misconduct with an alleged student. We've got your county, and hasn't there been budget a misrepresentation of the budget allocations? Something going on there with the monies at your school?
There's been some accusations of that from another activist group, and they're more concerned with how they want the money to be spent, not necessarily misappropriation. Where we're having issues is we've had a complete upheaval of multiple areas. One, our discipline policies. Two, Calvin Watts entered us into a program called Learning 2025, which is supposed to be a complete reimagining of the public education system. And that comes down to how we teach, how we discipline. And it was based off a research paper where people said, well, what could we do in an ideal world to make everything better? And for some reason, they decided to try to do that as an experiment on our kids, as opposed to just being a thought process. And so what we've ended up with is a constant upheaval daily of what our kids are supposed to expect, what our teachers and staff expect. And when it comes to finances, he has a pattern in the past of giving out contracts to friends. He got slapped on the hand for kickbacks in Washington. And here we're starting to see some of the
Bid
same
rigging.
patterns. I'm sorry?
We call that bid rigging.
Yes, ma'am. Yeah. Friends are getting financial kickback and benefit. And we also have organizations here who helped get these groups elected that are now asking for their financial favors, and those are starting to come due. So we're seeing a lot of, it's my turn to get the money is what's going on here.
So with that going on, the bid rigging and the issues with the finances, you also have weapons fights going on at your school too. You guys you're on the news day after day after day. Just here recently with a slew of scandals. We got Gwinnett parent teachers continue raising concerns about volatile safety situation in school. So not only the financial issues, but what's going on there with these weapons that's being bought into the facility.
So what we're seeing, they redid our discipline plan in July, and it's supposed to follow the lines of what they call restorative practice or restorative justice. And when that went out to teachers and staff, they were told we're trying to lower the number of suspensions, the disproportionate numbers of minorities who are being punished. And so what that did was tell our staff and our administration, you're not going to be sending referrals for X, Y, and Z. And the teachers no longer have the ability to discipline kids in their classroom. Kids are very smart, and when they get that little bit of leeway, if you give them the inch, they'll take a mile. And what has happened is a few bad kids act this way. There's no discipline. Now the other kids know, well, I'm free to do what I want as well. And suddenly we've had a mass increase in fights. We've had a mass increase in drug use. I believe marijuana instances just from August to the end of October were up 64%. We've had 7 handguns already in the first 3 months, where we only had 6 last year at all. So what you've got now is a case of, to use the old quote, the inmates running the asylum, and the teachers have their hands tied. The administration, which they can't say publicly, have their hands tied, and they're getting all this from the top down. But now the top's trying to place the blame on our teachers and administrators, saying they didn't understand the policy and they didn't implement it correctly. So rather than divert and go back to an old system of discipline, they're just now passing the buck and blaming it on the people who are employed by them, who will tell you, if they're not scared to lose their job, that that's not correct.
Right. Mary Kay Murphy, she rescinds the support for the CPS. So have you actually had a chance to look at this policy, or are you just going off of hearsay?
No, I've spent a lot of time. Actually, I'm a dad. I've got one son, and I've spent a lot of time on this and digging deeper into it. So the previous policy, which they call JCD, had 3 levels of discipline and had pretty strict controls. The new one, JCDI, has 5 levels of discipline. It's almost impossible to get to that top level unless you're looking at a severe criminal activity. And this was put in place because they were trying to lower the disproportionate gap of Black and brown students that were suspended, is what they said. However, what that has been translated to is we're not going to punish these kids at all. That's the only way we know to get the numbers down. And so Mary Kay Murphy at our last meeting has said she rescinds her support of the new policy, would prefer to go back to the old one. She's not the only one who feels that way. She's just the first one to publicly state it.
And I'm sure that, you know, when you go light on a criminal, the real criminals, they're going to take advantage of that, you know. And so, not saying that children are criminals, but criminal behavior does not discriminate. It doesn't.
And the law
And we
applies to
see
all
that
of it.
time and time again. Exactly. And we see that time and time again here in society. So what are some of the precautions that the parents are taking, or what are some of the things that they're trying to do just maybe to see a little bit of a difference in the policy at your school system?
Well, one thing that they just brought up Thursday, they're actually launching an emergency discipline task force, is what they're calling it. And they're calling in teachers, principals, and even members of the community. In fact, they actually asked me to be on it. And they're going to have 3 different 2-hour sessions where we're all supposed to go through this policy, figure out what immediate fixes can be put into place, and where, in their words, there's misunderstanding. And so I'm hoping that with something like that, especially involving teachers and parents who can say, no, this is absolutely insane. This needs to be fixed. Children need discipline. Children need structure. We have an alternative school system here where kids who finally get there get kicked to, that have uniforms, they have strict rules, they have strict discipline, and that school actually is very successful. So why do we not apply that more to our standard schools with our standard kids? One thing that I've told people for a long time now is that we are now placating the few at the detriment to the many. So these few kids, because it's not our whole school system that's acting this way, but the kids who do, the kids who fight, the kids who bring the drugs to school and the guns to school, those few kids are now making it impossible for the rest to have a safe, secure environment, to have an everyday education. And they're actually making it hard on the teachers and staff. I mean, no teacher should go to school worried she's going to the hospital at the end of the day with broken rib. I have, like I said, I have one son. He's very smart. He goes to a fantastic school, and his school has no issues. His principal, the teachers, they're all very of the old mindset. Discipline's followed. But when I saw these new board members come in, and it was very political on how they felt, and then they fired our old superintendent, then they bring in the new guy who's very political and very, you can just tell there's a progressive move there. I started digging more and digging more. And the one thing I can't take are people who are just in it for themselves. And while they say this is for the kids, this is all about money. This is all about politics, and this is all about power. And so I've been digging further and further to try to find the truth, because there's so many people. And even this week, the principal sent out, the superintendent sent out a very long email. It was almost a novel about how we're changing this, we're doing that. But if you looked at it, he didn't say anything. And too many parents and too many members of the community just take whatever they're told at face value. And what we're finding is evidence of the other. And that's what we're trying to get out there. And luckily, there's a big group of us, various parents, who've been able to get enough attention from people that they're starting to see, when we put this evidence out, here's what's really going on. You're being told one thing, but here's actually what's going on. It got so bad.
So if anyone wanted to question your involvement with this, or wonder why you were being involved with this at all, it would be okay to infer that you are a parent, you're a local citizen who's invested in your community, you are in your community, so you have other people's voices and their opinions coming back to you, kind of prompting you to say, listen, we'd like for you to get involved and kind of help us seek this or see this thing out, because there are some things that are going on that should not be going on here, like violence, misrepresentation of funds. These children, they're running our school system to the point where the students and the teachers do not feel safe here.
100%.
Is that correct?
Sure. And like I said, this has been almost a 2-year process. And in the last 6 months, I've suddenly had teachers and administrators and even high-level support staff reaching out to me saying, I can't say this. I'm an employee, but here's what's going on. I've probably got close to 150 teachers and administrators that reach out to me weekly with new stories and new things that are actually happening in the building, because they have no voice. They have no voice publicly. And so we as parents trying to support them are getting this information out for them. I've had people question, oh, he's making it up.
Absolutely.
Where the source is coming from. I kept all the receipts, but I'm trying to protect these people because they have jobs and they shouldn't lose their jobs for speaking out about what's right.
We know that usually sometimes when we go to those meetings, there's women and there's men and parents, and they like to argue, and there is no resolve. So, and you saying that you've allocated these receipts that you have, which is proof that you've spoken with these persons. Do you guys have a resolve or some sort of justice that you would like to see happen?
If you want the end game here, we want the superintendent removed. He couldn't run a district that only had 24,000 students without bankrupting it and causing staff and student issues. Now he's running the 11th largest district in the nation. He somehow failed up. And while he is a nice guy and everybody talked about how wonderful he was as a principal 10 years ago, that doesn't make him qualified to run an entity of this size. So we need this gentleman removed. The rumor is that the board has actually already asked him to resign and he refused. So the board at this point needs to, if they've asked him to leave, they need to fire him. And I understand publicly that will look bad for them because they hired the guy. But when you've made a mistake, you have to admit it and you have to move on. So we need somebody who can come in and fix all these mistakes that were made. We need a discipline policy that will go back to giving us a safe environment for our kids and teachers. And we need to focus back on heavy academics because there was learning loss during COVID, thanks to shutdowns. Luckily, our county wasn't shut down that long. But at the same time, some of these kids have never really gotten back into it. And we've got to fix that type of achievement gap in order to make sure these kids will become successful adults and successful citizens. And right now with the fight club every day at school, there's not a lot of learning going on. There is a lot of fear and anxiety. And we're starting to see that the new plans they have in place don't work. We need somebody that can come in and fix this mess.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I'll tell you this. I know enough teachers who are getting ready to quit or walk out that they're actually considering a walkout. We don't have teacher unions in Georgia. They can't strike, but they're so fed up at this point that they're threatening to walk. And we've made that clear to the board. In fact, Mary Kay Murphy brought that up during their work session, that there are a lot of teachers getting ready to leave our system due to the leadership or the lack thereof. And eventually as this goes on, I'm hoping and I'm praying that our governor's paying attention, because the governor in Georgia does have power to remove school boards. There is the ability to even remove a superintendent due to negligence. And the fact that we have this continual violence going on, we have teachers getting ready to leave, we already have a teacher shortage. We've got a disaster brewing in this county. And if somebody doesn't step up and be an adult and take the reins, we're not going to have anything left to fight for.
No, that's absolutely true. That is absolutely true. And we just commend you, because this is not an easy task. And especially when you're showing your face and you're speaking about these things and people have seen you out here in the community, you're standing up for what you mean. And so we respect that 100%. But instead of leaving, seek it out and be financially compensated and help, and maybe, be financially compensated and you guys start to run for office. So that way this does not continue to happen, because we're seeing this across the board, not only in just Georgia, Steve, we are seeing it in Ohio. We're seeing it in Arizona. We're seeing a whole lot going on that just should not be going on. And it's local commissioners. It's the school board, and it goes up. But like you said, it's about being involved in your community. We're at a time right now that it is so important for us to get involved and stay involved in our communities and not give up the good fight. And I know it's hard and it's easier said than done. Every day you wake up, you have your own slew of things to do. You're a father with children, with a child, a boy at that you're raising to become a man. So that's very difficult in today's society. That's telling him, and telling you also that you have no worth. That you should just, switch who you are because you don't matter. And you're standing tall on your beliefs.
I'll tell you this.
So what
I
are
asked
some...
him, and I'm sorry to interrupt you, but
No,
you mentioned raising a boy into a man. I actually asked him about a year ago. I said, son, I've been at this for almost a year. Are you okay if I stop working on this? Is this affecting anything for you at school? Because obviously I was concerned about maybe blowback. And he said, well, have you gotten what you wanted yet? Is everything fixed? I said, no. He said, then you can't stop. You got to keep going. So your kids pay attention to that sort of thing. And I will tell parents that, Georgia's different than Florida. DeSantis has a lot different constitutional power than Kemp does here in Georgia. if you're going to get involved in these type of fights, make sure that you really learn what your local laws are and know what your officials can and can't do. So many parents were like, why didn't he just take him out? Well, he can't. The Georgia Constitution doesn't allow that. There's a process. So if you're going to be involved and you're going to have these fights with people at the local level, make sure you really figure out what legally you're allowed to do. And that's some of the things we've started working on, is following that process to make sure that you do it the right way. You can complain and you can just scream and cry about it, or you can figure out the right way and get something done. And so that's why it's taken this amount of time to get where we're at now, but it's worth it, because in the long run, these 9, 10, 11-year-old kids, we've got to get them a good education, get them sent off to college or a technical school, whatever it is. We've got to raise them to be good adults. And right now we're telling them that you can do whatever you want. There's no consequence. And the other side is just running around in fear, watching this go down. We can't have that anymore.
No, absolutely. Most certainly. So your son, when he says, Dad, did you finish everything? Did you get it done? Did you accomplish what you set out for? And you said, no, not yet. And he tells you to continue to push forward. Would you say that this is because he's actually seeing the damages to what happens when you stand back and you do nothing?
He has. I mean,
would you give him that much credit?
Absolutely. He's very intelligent, and he understands that and I've explained it to him. And it's not just me. I want to be very clear about that. There are hundreds of parents who are all part of this in this county that are working on this. And every one of them's in it for the same reason. It's their kids, and there's been something detrimental that's happened or something they've seen, and we're trying to get it back on track. I grew up in this county. I graduated from a high school in this county. I moved away and came back to raise a family in this county. And I don't want to see everything that was built up and the amazing success that we had here gone just because somebody wanted to play a political experiment game, or worse, try to get their name out there for power. That's not what you do. And you're not building your career off the back of 182,000 kids. You're not doing it. You're supposed to be educating, teaching, and advancing these children's lives. You're not here just to get a paycheck and to make yourself famous. That's it.
Absolutely. And we see it too much. We see too many people getting, kickbacks. And as you know, they have to have an emergency relief fund set up specifically for these districts, for these sheriffs, for all these entities. They have to have it. And we see them not taking these boards not taking any cuts. They could play a role in the percentage of the millage rate going up. They can definitely cut that, but they're not. And so they're lining their pockets to fit just right up there with this superintendent. And so collectively, you see a whole lot of disgusting, intentions just being brought out right now, and especially after elections. Sure. So now moving forward, how can your community, or people who are not out inside of your community, I guess, how can we support you from afar? What are some things we can do?
Well, in part of the problem we've had here in Gwinnett is that because we've had a shifting voting demographic, we've also had a shifting racial demographic. And so a lot of the criticism has been that the only reason we're doing this is because we now have Black leadership as opposed to all white leadership, which we've had before. And that's just not the case. Our county is the 7th most diverse county in the United States. We have over 1 million people. We're a suburb of Atlanta, but we might as well be our own major city. And with a $2.8 billion school budget, we are a large organization. So you're going to have a lot of people of different backgrounds and beliefs and political systems, and that's fine. Where the problem has been these outside activist groups who have made everything a racial issue. Our discipline policy was revamped over a racial issue. Our academic issues, they said, were a racial issue. So what we're trying to do is put out the factual information and let people know this isn't about race. This isn't about politics. This is about kids. And this is a unity thing. We need all walks of our community to come together and realize that the problem is the leadership. It's not the parents who are fighting each other about this. It's our leadership. So what we'd like to do, and what we'd like to see as it comes to outside support, as you asked, is for people to realize and really look at our numbers and see what it is that's going on here. You have a superintendent who is out giving paid speeches in different states to show the success he's had growing an equity program, instead of being here and looking at the results of that and realizing it's a giant disaster. We have a board that some of the members have higher political aspiration. And so they're making decisions based on their future political career as opposed to the dumpster fire they've created right now. And they'll walk away from this scot-free to move on to other things and leave this in its wake. So we need the parents in Gwinnett, we need the parents in the Metro Atlanta area really to be paying attention, because again, I've said we're the 11th largest school district in the nation. We have 1 million people in this county. We're an economic driver. Bad schools mean businesses leave. Bad schools mean families leave. And this was a draw to the North Georgia area. So if this doesn't get fixed, whether it's through government, whether it's through parents actually being able to get this done, you're going to have a giant void that's coming out of this county, which has been so successful for so long. So what we really need are fellow people who agree with where this is at, showing this isn't working, to reach out to your legislators, reach out to the board that we have here in Gwinnett County, and let them know this isn't okay. And you support the teachers, you support the students. What you don't support is this type of activity going on in our school system. Who I feel for the most, truthfully, even more than the kids at this point, are our teachers. Teachers have always had a hard time. It's a low-paying job. It's underappreciated. COVID was a nightmare when it came to new things they had to learn and still try to educate. And now that they're back in the building, they're dealing with violence, they're dealing with disrespect, and they're dealing with leadership that is saying, deal with it. It's not our problem. Find a way, figure it out. We will lose. We have over 23,000 staff members in this county, and I would expect us to lose at least 1,000 coming next year. We're already short. We can't afford it anymore.
No,
And
absolutely.
we won't be attracting any new ones
Absolutely.
with what's going on.
Absolutely. And so and that's why I said, you guys, Gwinnett to Georgia has been like the number one. Now we hear about Floyd, Cherokee, Forsyth, all these other counties, but when it comes to, like you said, the interracial, multicultural background of the upper to middle class in Georgia, that's Gwinnett, and there has been a grand decline. You guys have been on the news nonstop. We've got this Lenox small slew of shootings that have just come out the woodworks. When Lenox, you used to not be able to go into Lenox unless you had a certain amount of money in your pocket, so it's just it's very interesting the way things have changed over the course of years for Gwinnett. And as you stated, it's bad misrepresentation. It's the people that you're electing. When you have a rise in property taxes and you have an upheaval in crime, obviously there's a mismatch there, and every time Lenox or one of your places is put on the news for violent crimes or things like that, your property values go down. A lot of people don't understand real estate or how it works, but your property values go down every time there's a shooting over there, every time there's a reporting, every time the police responds, it goes down. But the millage rate is continually going up. And that has to do with, you said, the school board. That has to do with the commissioners. That has to do collectively with the representation out there. So like you said, get involved, do what you've got to do. Doesn't matter which side you're representing. The fact of it is that you come together and you come to some sort of resolve, because this ain't gonna work.
I'll be honest with you. Me and the chairwoman that run the board could not be farther apart. She cannot stand me, and I'm not a big fan of hers either. But we had an emergency meeting a couple of weeks ago. They called it a code red. It was at a church in Lawrenceville, and roughly 400 members of the community showed up, and everybody gave great answers. We had judges, we had police, we had ministers, and everybody gave open, honest answers with solutions. The only person who didn't was the superintendent, who had scripted answers that didn't even fit the questions. He gave no answers and no solutions. And at the end of that meeting, I went up to her and she saw me coming and she said, she just had a look. I said, look, I don't like you. You don't like me. And we both know that. But we got to call a truce right now, because this has to get fixed. And it doesn't matter that we disagree on policy and equity and everything else. If we don't get this fixed for our kids, none of it's going to matter. So even that type of relationship, we're trying to build, and we're trying to get in the middle on this and figure out how to fix it. It seems the only person who's not interested in that is the person who put it in place to begin with. And I get it. It's a giant mistake. I'm sure it's a big blow to the ego to admit you've messed up and you need to go a new course. But this guy is dead determined to stick to it, because it's a 4-year plan. It's called Learning 2025. We can't just quit now. Yeah, we can. We really can. We can find another way to do this.
We've got to go ahead and make sure that you guys get taken care of, so that, like a domino effect, what shouldn't be throughout the rest of the Metro Atlanta area. So
You just hit that
we'll
on the
have you
head.
back on the show.
Yeah.